Hello everyone, welcome back to a new Murky Paintwater episode. The case we will be discussing today is a very recent and still active one. Before we jump into it, I have some warnings and disclaimers. Warning, this video contains mature subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised. Disclaimer, since there is still an ongoing investigation into this case, I want to explicitly state that none of the information shared in this video has been brought before a judge, and a lot of it has been brought forth by the media. I did my very best to research this story and to report on the most confirmed information only, so as to avoid speculation. There is a reason not all of the information in active cases is shared with the public, and I ask you to respect this and have faith in the law enforcement officers tasked with the investigation into this case. While public awareness for a case can be of value for several reasons, one of the negative effects can be the spreading of rumors and false information on a case, leading investigators on a wild goose chase. So, while spreading awareness is good, please don't involve yourself in the investigation in any way, spread misinformation on this case, or harass any party involved in this case. Thank you. The Gabby Petito case is one that has spread like a wildfire, so there's a good chance you have already heard of this case. There are several reasons why there has been such a large amount of media coverage and attention on this case. Diving into all the reasons would be a whole video on its own. If you're interested in a separate video on this topic, feel free to let me know in the comments. But the reason I do want to mention it is because this case started out as a missing persons case and got a lot of attention. Now, as you can imagine, the more attention a missing persons case gets, the more likely it is that someone who knows something is made aware of the fact that that person that they saw is missing and that the authorities want information. So, attention for a missing persons case is generally a good thing. However, I do also want to mention that besides the Petito family, there are a lot of other families who are missing loved ones and are looking for them. The fact that I am shedding light on the Gabby Petito case first is in no way, shape, or form a value judgment about any missing persons cases or the people it involves. I will be making videos about other missing persons cases in the future. If you have any recommendations, feel free to let me know in the comments. So with that in the back of our minds, let's jump into this case. Gabrielle Gabby Petito was a 22-year-old woman from Long Island, New York. Gabby loved traveling the globe. She started dating Brian Laundrie in 2019, and they often traveled the US together. The couple also moved in together, sharing a residence with Brian's parents, but since the pair was so keen on traveling, they were quickly back on the road. Gabby and Brian even got engaged in July 2020. Gabby told her followers on Instagram in a post that included a photo of them and a romantic caption. In the summer of 2021, the pair started a cross-country road trip, living out of a 2012 white Ford Transit Connect. Gabby had quit her job for this road trip and decided to share their journey via social media. They started their trip on the 2nd of July, going from Blue Point, New York, via Kansas, Colorado, and into Utah, mainly visiting national parks and posting gorgeous photos to Instagram. Gabby kept in contact with family during the course of their trip. On the 12th of August, 2021, another side of their seemingly loving relationship is witnessed by people in Moab, Utah, near the Moonflower Cooperative. A man calling 911 reports a domestic dispute between a man and a woman in a white van with Florida license plates. He tells the 911 operator he saw, quote, "The gentleman was slapping the girl as he drove by." When the man stopped his vehicle, they, Gabby and Brian, were running up and down the sidewalk as Brian proceeded to hit her. They then hopped in the car and drove off. Law enforcement tracked down the white vehicle and pulled it over. Now, the interesting part in this case is the fact that the officer pulling Gabby and Brian's van over was recording the whole thing on his body cam. This footage has also been released to the public when Gabby was reported missing. Now, the total of that video is about an hour and 17 minutes long, and you can find the footage on several different sites, so I don't feel it necessary to include it in my video, but you're free to check it out if you want to, since I'm obviously going to only mention highlights, and they are going to be my interpretation of the footage. On the footage, you can hear the officer state that he is behind the van and that he's going to pull the vehicle over. The vehicle was speeding and showed some quote-unquote obscure driving. The van even hit a curb while the officer was driving behind it. As the officer approaches the vehicle, you can see Brian behind the wheel and Gabby in the seat beside him. Gabby is crying and Brian is not. The officer talks to Gabby away from Brian, and she tells him they have been fighting and how some of it is because of her supposed OCD and, bad vibe, she calls it, which she has apologized to Brian for. She mentions that she's stressed because she has been so busy working on the travel blog website and that Brian doesn't believe she can do any of it. After this conversation, the officers talk to Brian. Brian proceeds telling his story, which mentions some of the same points that Gabby said, but he does stress that he has tried to keep things calm between them. He does mention him locking the car and trying to walk in a different direction to cool things down for him and Gabby, and pushing Gabby away from him to create distance between them. He also apologizes multiple times for any wrongdoing on his part concerning his driving. Brian has wounds on his face and hands, and when asked about them, he mentions the wounds in his face are from Gabby hitting him with her phone, and the ones on his hand is from a wire. He doesn't go into specifics in the footage, so what type of wire or why, I don't know. The officers didn't have the information relayed in the 911 call that states that Brian could have also hit Gabby. So, seeing as Brian was the person with visible wounds and Gabby confirmed that she had hit Brian, the officers followed the standard domestic violence protocol and separated Brian and Gabby for the night. After this night, the couple reunites and goes on to continue their travels together. Brian reportedly left a couple days at the end of August to go back to Florida to move some items into storage. During this time, Gabby stays behind in Salt Lake City and sleeps in a hotel named Fairfield Inn and Suites. There, she is seen on camera footage of the hotel, leaving the hotel on the 24th of August. Now, here is where the sources of the things I mentioned matter, since a lot of it is based on eyewitness accounts which are not always correct. Memory can be a fickle thing, and people are prone to want to help out in these dire cases, even when they're not super sure, and also sometimes insert themselves into the investigation for more questionable reasons. So it is important to know that not all of what I will be sharing might be truthful. There's an account of a lady who said she saw Brian park the white Ford van at Spread Creek in Moran, Wyoming on the 26th of August around 8 p.m. She also says she passed by the van several times and remembers the van being there from the 26th to the 29th of August that year. Now, during that time interval, there is also a woman that stated on Instagram that she remembers seeing Brian and Gabby in a restaurant called the Merry Piglets on August the 27th, around 1 p.m. She says that she and her partner were sat next to Gabby and Brian, and they witnessed the couple arguing with the staff and leaving the restaurant ultimately. Now, supposedly, Brian was more angry and arguing with the host of the restaurant, and Gabby was busy apologizing to the same host and trying to leave the restaurant. Now, the next sighting is backed up by video footage, so I would say that that is a more reliable story. The white Ford van is actually seen on video, taped by a YouTube channel called Red, White, and Bethune on the 27th of August around 6 p.m. The van is parked on the Spread Creek camping area. Now, this sighting and location is going to matter, so keep it in mind as we move forward. Now, back to eyewitness reports, so less reliable. Brian is picked up 2 days later at public showers by a couple at around 5 p.m. He wants to go to Jackson and is hitchhiking to go there. And luck would have it, the couple were heading exactly that way. Something odd she did mention is that Brian offered them like $200 to drive them to Jackson, which is only a 10-mile journey, or 25 kilometers for those using the metric system. He mentions to the couple that he has been camping for a couple of days without his fiancée. So he does actually mention a fiancé because his fiancé was supposedly working on their social media page back in their van. Now, reportedly, Brian freaked out somewhere along the journey, stating that he wanted to get out of the vehicle. So they dropped him off at a parking lot and they went on with their journey without Brian. Now, please note that this sighting has not been confirmed by authorities, but it was shared across media since it was very detailed and it might trigger other people to remember Brian being around that area around this date. And apparently it worked, since there has also been somebody that stepped forward recently and is saying that she also gave Brian a ride on August the 29th, but that was a little later in the day, and she dropped him off at the Spread Creek dispersed camping area at around 6:35 p.m. Now, for all of you attentive watchers, we have already mentioned this area before. This is where the other woman had the footage from the van parked right there at Spread Creek camping area. So, something to make a note of. Now, this woman says that Brian wanted her to drop him off at the beginning of the road toward the camping area. And he even started opening the door around that area when she was still kind of joking, like, I could just give you a ride right up to the camping grounds, and you don't have to look all tough like for your fiance, looking like you hiked all the way there. But Brian didn't really respond to that, and he just wanted to quickly get out of the vehicle. And the vehicle, she said, was even still moving as he got out. Now, a day later, on August 30th, Gabby's mom, Nicole, received a text from Gabby's phone reading, "No service in Yosemite." Yosemite being a national park. Now, Gabby's mom to this day does not believe that message was sent by Gabby, since it didn't really sound like something Gabby would send her. And also, mom went on record and said, the van was in Florida on the 1st of September, which we will get into next. I think I can do the math. So then on September 1st, Brian arrives at his parents' house in Northport, Florida. And he is in Gabby's white van, but there's no Gabby. Gabby is only officially reported missing on the September 11th by her parents, so not by Brian, not by his parents who see him coming home without Gabby. Now, the reason it took quite a while for them to get her officially reported missing was also because the authorities were said to not really have been super forward with making a report about her missing. But, that's all hearsay. So I would take that with a grain of salt. It is something the mother has said. But on September the 11th, we at least know that she was officially reported missing. So until September the 11th, her parents had been trying to reach both Gabby and Brian, and even went as far as to get in touch with Brian's parents, asking them if they had heard anything or if they could get in touch with Brian and Gabby. Now, they did say that when even Brian's parents didn't respond at all, alarm bells started going off for them. Now, what happens next is quite bizarre. Since Gabby was an adult and there was no clear indication of a crime, the case was handled as a missing persons case for quite some time. With Gabby traveling through several large nature reserves and the possibilities of where she could be being seemingly endless, the police had quite some trouble tracking Gabby down. The massive amount of media attention for Gabby's case, both traditional and social media, made more and more information come forward. Now, as I mentioned before, not all of the information that is gathered is going to be reliable, but in this case, the video footage of the van and people coming forward with their stories about the couple did give law enforcement extra clues as to where they should be looking for Gabby. Now, all the while, Brian and Brian's parents refused to cooperate with law enforcement. They also didn't speak to any media outlets or even Gabby's parents on Gabby's disappearance. Authorities started looking for Gabby near Spread Creek, where the van was last seen, where they eventually found human remains on September the 19th, which were later confirmed to be Gabby's. It has been determined that Gabby's death is a homicide. In the time leading up to the finding of Gabby's body, Brian too disappeared. His disappearance and how it was handled was not received well by the public. Since they hadn't found any evidence of a possible crime being committed, the police handled Brian's disappearance as a missing persons case and not as anything else. Meanwhile, both Gabby's parents and the public were upset since, to them, the situation was clear as day. Brian harmed Gabby and was running from authorities. Why else wouldn't he want to cooperate to find the woman he supposedly loved so much and wanted to marry? According to Brian's family, Brian left on Tuesday the 14th of September with a backpack, and he told them he was going to the massive Carlton Reserve, which he would frequent for hikes. The funny thing is, though, his parents only mentioned this to police on Friday the 17th of September, at which point Brian hadn't been home for 3 nights. During these days, Brian's family did go to the Carlton Reserve to look for Brian on Wednesday, and found his car there. Apparently, it had a notice from police on it stating that the car had to be removed. Then they left the car there overnight so that Brian could drive back if he were to return to the car, but they went to retrieve it on Thursday when Brian didn't return. Now, while I'm making this video, the search for Brian is still underway, and there are a lot of stories and speculations out there about whether Brian is still alive or not, and his possible whereabouts. Brian is currently the only person of interest in this case. There is a warrant out for his arrest, but that only pertains to Brian committing credit card fraud and is not related to Gabby's death. According to the agency, he used someone else's Capital One bank card between August the 30th and September 1st, and he took out more than $1,000. Since this is an active case, there is no clear-cut ending to this story. There's no certainty but the fact that Gabby died due to another person taking her life. My thoughts go out to Gabby and her loved ones. So that concludes today's episode. Let me know what you think about this case and what you think might have happened, and leave it in the comments down below. If you would like to see more videos from me in which I deep dive into true crime cases whilst painting, consider liking this video and maybe subscribing to my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!